Hello, my name is Natalie Sweet. I'm a learning community facilitator in the history learning community at SNHU, and I'll be guiding you today on how to develop a thesis statement. No matter where you're at in your studies here at SNHU, if you're taking a history class, you're likely going to develop a thesis statement within that class. The thesis of your paper should do a number of things. First, it should directly answer your research question. Your research question may be provided to you by your instructor, or it may be something that you have to develop on your own. Either way, that research question is an important point of developing your thesis statement. The thesis statement should also provide direction to your paper. It will help keep you on track and focused about what you're supposed to be writing about. Your thesis statement also tells your reader what you will prove within your paper. Your reader should be able to read your thesis statement and understand, or at least have an expectation of the information that is going to be presented to them within the paper. And finally, your thesis statement should be a statement that must be defended with evidence. You don't want generalities. You want something that challenges your reader and makes them wonder, well, how are they going to prove this? And to understand how to develop a thesis, let's take a sample research question and go through the process of developing a thesis statement to answer that question. Our student has developed this particular research question in her history class on the Civil War. And it is, why was Northern opinion of Mary Todd Lincoln low during the Civil War? In order to answer this question, she's first going to consider her primary and her secondary sources. After she does a preliminary read-through of those sources, she wants to arrive at a conclusion that answers that research question. She's wanting to know, she wants to discover the truth, arrive at a truth. Her initial claim is going to be that Northern opinion of Mary Lincoln was low during the Civil War. However, notice that while this directly links to the research question, it doesn't explain why Northern opinion of Mary Lincoln was low during the Civil War. This thesis statement needs a bit more polishing. So in order to do that, the student then wants to go back to her primary and her secondary sources and review them again for evidence that will directly support this thesis statement. As she reads through her sources, she wants to look for facts, and that's because facts are indisputable. She wants to stay away from opinion as she moves through. It shouldn't just be because she's done a few readings and she has the sense that people didn't like Mary Todd Lincoln because they thought, let's say, that she was not a proper first lady. That is her opinion, but she doesn't have anything to really back that opinion up. So, for example, she goes to this letter that appeared in a Washington newspaper during the Civil War. And as she reads through it, she sees that there's complaints about Mary Todd Lincoln's spending habits. They're complaining about the expensive way that she dressed and that she's held this big party during a time of war. And that for this person, this is contributing to a feeling of animosity towards the First Lady. And as she moves through other primary sources, she sees that these are sentiments that are repeated more than once. And she realizes that there's a public perception of the First Lady as having spending too much money in her office. So what they then want to do is say, okay, I realize that these perceptions are here, and here's the evidence. So she's building the evidence to develop this thesis. She's then going to take that evidence to support the claim that she's developing. So again, here's the claim. She's expanded a bit. She says Northern opinion of Mary Lincoln was low during the Civil War due to public perception of her social habits and family. But why and how? We need to pull in some extra details here. So our first piece of supporting evidence is this. In other sources, our reader sees that Mary Todd Lincoln's relatives fought for the Confederacy. People voiced distrust of her Confederate relatives and in turn grew to dislike her. Supporting evidence, too, is something that we read from that primary source that our reader looked at. Mary Todd Lincoln made large purchases during the war, and people disliked her spending. And then we have supporting evidence number 3, also which we found about when we looked at the primary source. She held a grand ball in 1862, and people thought she held too many entertainments and that wasn't appropriate during wartime. So we have pieces of evidence that we can directly pull from our sources and to have that evidence back up our claim in our thesis statement. So with that in mind, we need to put this all together now. So we need to connect that initial claim and all this evidence. Now, a great way to do that is to use connecting words and phrases. And in this presentation, I've provided a few to you. You can use illustrates how or illustrates why, contributed to, resulted in, as a result of, due to, through, because, and since. So let's take example 1. Here is a thesis statement that has been developed by the student. Overall Northern opinion of Mary Lincoln was low during the Civil War due to public perceptions of her Confederate relatives, her spending habits, and her entertainments. This is a statement where the reader is definitely going to know where the writer is going with her points. It's also going to help the writer stay focused as well. They can organize paragraphs of evidence around each of these 3 points within their paper. It's also clear, direct, and a sentence in length, which is what you ultimately want your thesis statement to do. Our examples number 2 and 3 also do the same thing, but these are just to illustrate to you the different ways that you can use these connecting phrases and how you can arrange your thesis statement. In example 2, we have, because of the public's perception of her Confederate relatives, her spending habits, and her entertainments, overall Northern opinion of Mary Lincoln was low during the Civil War. And in example 3, the public's perception of Mary Lincoln's Confederate relatives, her spending habits, and her entertainments resulted in Northerners holding an overall negative opinion of the president's wife. Each of these thesis statements are direct, to the point, will guide the writer, and alerts the reader to the purpose of this paper. Keep this in mind as you move forward and work in your own thesis statements. Remember, don't be general. Make certain that your thesis statement is one that has to be defended with evidence. Make certain that your reader will take interest in what you're saying and that they're going to know where you're going with your argument. If you have any questions after watching this video, feel free to come to our learning community to ask your questions, be in touch with your instructor, or talk it through with your other classmates. We look forward to hearing from you.